Good evening, everybody. So, this week is Module 4, Discussion 4 with Group 3. It's asking us to do 2 questions from each chapter. So, I'm going to jump right into it. Discuss how communication works within an organization. Explain upward, downward, and lateral communication. Discuss the role in silence. And what its meanings and how should I understand in the context. Basically, it's messages either relaying upward through a hierarchy or downward or lateral as a team or within a given section. So I just use the military because that's what I'm used to. So, downward communication messages that need to come down. So I'm in charge of a fitness program per se, and there's a lot of information that comes down from higher headquarters Air Force. This is how you're going to run business within your organization or within the installation. So messages come down from the program owner in a sense, and I'm just the manager of it, and I relay that message to everybody else within the installation, the different units. So there's your lateral communication in a sense, and saying, hey, this just came down. This is how we're going to do business now because of COVID and some of the exemptions, not necessarily exemptions, but standard operation procedures in the sense of how we're going to do PT testing once it resumes in July. And then the downward communication is, again, into this to the sections or within the sections of my own organization, within my own squadron or unit. Upward communication is basically saying, hey, after the message comes down, or says, hey, I have this concern about how we're going to do this, given all of these different stipulations or red tapes, how are we going to communicate, how are we going to do this PT testing? So then, hey, things like manning, do we have enough manning or not, so on and so forth. So those messages are going up, as far up as it can go. And that's a lot of the back and forth and across the board communications that are happening. Role of silence. To me, the silence is people choosing not to say anything or keeping it to themselves as far as gatekeeping information within their own sections. We have 5 different sections, so I'm just going to use an example. We have 5 different sections, and each section has a different mission set. So people within one section is saying, nope, this is only my problem. I'm not going to say anything because this is within my section. You have nothing to do with this, Ducart. So I'm just going to keep it within this section. Or it could be just the fact to say, hey, I don't want to say anything because there might be some judgment on their way of thinking or they're just the way that they are. Don't know, but there's different reasons as to that. Or silence just as on a whole, as a person doesn't know enough of a subject, so they choose not to say anything because they don't want to sound dumb. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Using a specific bad example, experience and discuss how to improve both horizontal and lateral communication. That one I just kind of go back to a member again within their own section. They don't want to say anything, even though we're the ones. I handle 5 different sections opposed to just one. So if there's one person not saying anything, I don't know what's going on there, so I can't come up with other plans or solve other or come up with different solutions that basically say everybody. So my thing that I've tried in the past is saying, hey, here's some implications if I don't know all the variables to operate this unit in a sense. Just kind of saying, hey, this is nothing against you. I kind of need to know in order for us to have a better way to come up with a solution for a set problem and make them feel as if they're not the only ones that should come up with a solution. It's a team effort thing where everybody's working and communicating openly throughout the whole discussion process, basically. jumping to chapter 6, I picked number 3, and this is basically using Shane's organizational cultural model on page 58, and actually on page 158 it talks about the different concepts of the structural rational perspective. Um, Basically, um, developing. Sorry, I kind of drew a blank there. Um, View of our organization climate provides a good bridge to our discussion later in the chapter. Forces you to ask climate phenomenon that can consciously manipulate or deem advisable change in management to increase. What is the climate in uniform? So I think of this as having subcultures within a unit's culture. So I have 5 different sections, and each of those guys are they're separate little cultures. However, there's an overarching culture, the military culture, in the sense of how to conduct business, and then we have core values within it, within that whole overarching thing. But as long and everybody has their own little structures, and as you move up, you're going into a different layer or a different perspective of climate or a culture, right? You have your airmen, your frontline workers, you have your frontline managers, and then you have your middle managers, and then you have your chiefs or the section supervisors, superintendents. So within all of those, there's different cultures or different mindsets, but they're pretty much within the same thing. So it talks about concept pools, kernel climate, particular climates, and it's just again just sub different cultures of what that is, and we just throw out, like for me, I throw out different ideas for a lot of my section leads and saying, hey, here's an idea to think about. What do you think about this? And then they formulate their own thing specifically for that section, if that makes any sense. And then going to where's the other one? Sheen's So I mixed up. So the last one I did was Poole and McPhee's organizational kind of like conceived, and then the Sheen's organizational model is the one about mechanisms, and that one was on page 162 through 163, and it talks about culture embedding mechanisms. Basically, you're giving them reasons to adhere to certain behavioral culture, whatever that may be. So within the military, again, I use it as an example because I've been in for 14 years. There's a table 6.4 on page 163 that talks about things or mechanisms that people that managers may use to kind of formulate their own culture within an organization. What leaders choose to focus on. Like I choose to focus on a lot of training because we're guardsmen. We don't have that full-time capacity of being an active duty component. So I focus on a lot of training. A lot of people don't like that, but that's one of the primary things. So anything that has to do with training, I'm gonna try to reward that behavior in a sense, to get that mentality of saying, okay, the more training we do, the better we're going to be at, and then we're going to be as compatible, if not better, than the active duty component. How leaders respond to critical events, that's another primary example. Things happen out of nowhere. How do I deal with that? I actually think, at least I feel like, I do a lot better in high stress environments where I don't lose my cool. So then if I'm saying that, or I'm perceiving that out in front of my members, they'll be like, hey, there's nothing to worry about, right? Because they don't see me being all anxious about it. So if there are people like that, or other managers or team leads that are doing that type of behavior, I usually try to pull them aside and try to get them out of that stressful environment and say, hey man, let's, or hey, let's work this out. It's okay. Let's just kind of break it down step by step. What's priority, and let's get this thing knocked out. And then there's a secondary mechanisms to it. Let's see here. How leaders structure the organization. So there's depending on experience, right? I'm not going to put somebody that has no experience in food. I'm not also going to put somebody that's on fitness or lodging, whatever the case may be, unless I feel like they can learn that. But I'm also going to help them get to that point. Are they going to have people within that section that might be lower ranking than them to get them up to speed, that I entrust them to do the same and kind of do a little bit of what do they call reverse mentoring? Yeah, to those members that don't necessarily, or there's team leads that don't necessarily know what's going on. But that's where I'm at. Hopefully, I got everything there with those. But basically, is culture embedding mechanisms reward the true meaning mechanisms used by leaders to reward and promote embedded desired traits within our organization culture. The military's got plenty of them, especially with rites and rituals, promotion ceremonies, big awards, retirement ceremonies, so on and so forth. So that video was a little bit longer, but I had a lot of detail to discuss with you guys. So I cannot wait to hear what you guys all think. You guys have a good night.